Hi, it's Terry Ryder from Hotspotting, and this is my regular weekly feature, Hotspot of the Week. Tomorrow morning, early, I'm heading to Brisbane Airport to fly to Perth to speak at a special seminar event which will be hosted by a Perth property entity, Niche Living. And so it's appropriate perhaps to have a focus on Perth with this week's edition of Hotspot of the Week, because that market is showing increasing signs of recovery. It was doing so earlier, perhaps throughout 2018 and into the early part of this year. There were growing signs of increased activity, vacancies were dropping, rents were rising, and it looked like the Perth market was at last on the way back after a prolonged downturn. But then it hit a wall, and the wall was called the federal election, which put a brake on activity in markets right across Australia in various ways. And so there was a kind of a pause in the Perth recovery, but the latest evidence is it's now starting to get a pace again now that we've got all that uncertainty out of the way, and we've had a series of fortunate events in terms of interest rate cuts, tax cuts, relaxation of lending criteria by APRA, etc., etc. So things are starting to move along in the right direction for Perth again. It has at its advantage the fact that, according to a number of different sources who produce regular reports on affordability, Western Australia now has the highest level of affordability anywhere in the country, and Perth is the most affordable capital city. That's the relativity of prices to incomes primarily. And so I thought I would focus on the most affordable part of the Perth market, and that's the Kwinana precinct. Indeed, it's got pricing which is, in terms of the lowness of the prices, unmatched anywhere in capital city Australia, with the exception of some of the really cheap parts of northern Adelaide. Many of the suburbs in this precinct have median house prices in the 200,000s after several years of gradual decline. But it's got a lot going for it, which I will talk about as we go through the report on that precinct, which I'm holding in my hand, which is available on the Hotspotting website. So Perth, the most affordable of the capital cities, according to most affordability measures, and the Kwinana precinct, the most affordable of the Perth precincts. Indeed, I saw a report which suggested it's the only part of the Perth market where it's actually cheaper to own than it is to rent. In the Kwinana precinct, the local government area of Kwinana, according to one research source, the typical share of income that's required to pay the typical mortgage in this area of Perth is just 21%, compared to the Perth average of 28% and the Sydney average of 46%. That's according to the ANZ affordability report. So affordability in Perth, the best it's been since 2004, so the best in 15 years. And this is the most affordable part, but an area needs to be more than cheap for us to suggest that it might be worth taking a look at as investors. So here are some of the qualities that make it worthy of consideration. It's a very much a growth part of the Perth market. The current population of the Kwinana local government area is about, I think, under 40,000, but it's projected that within about 15 years it will have more than doubled, and they're projecting that about 2035 the population will be around 85,000, so more than double what it is now. So this local government area is about 35 to 40 kilometres south of the Perth CBD. It's got good transport links because it's on the Kwinana Freeway, and it's also on the Mandurah Metropolitan Rail line. There's a couple of train stations that stop at the various suburbs of the Kwinana local government area. It's a place of young families, boosted by the high level of affordability, so popular with first-home buyers and other buyers on a budget. It's very culturally and linguistically diverse. 42% of all residents were born overseas, according to a census. It's got a lot of good amenities, library and resource centre, community centre, a couple of community centres. The Kwinana Town Centre is a place with major services, facilities and amenities, including the Marketplace Shopping Centre. Probably one of the biggest factor is proximity to major jobs nodes. Contrary to popular belief, most people don't work in the CBD of a major cities. They work in suburban jobs nodes, and perhaps the biggest, or certainly one of the biggest in Perth, is the Kwinana Industries Council precinct, which is part of this area, not far from the residential areas that I'll speak about in a moment. But very, very major industrial and resources companies like BHP Billiton, BP, Synergy, and Alcoa, and many others have a major presence there. And there are many thousands of jobs there. And so proximity to that is a major factor, as well as affordability, because the research shows that the motivating factors for people to choose where they elect to buy and live is A, affordability, and B, proximity to work. They want to be as close to their workplace as humanly possible. Let's see, lots of schools in the area, both primary school and secondary schools, as well as a couple of TAFE colleges, lots of childcare centres. Just looking at that industrial precinct I mentioned a moment ago, the companies that populate that industrial precinct have annual sales of $8.5 billion. They directly employ about 5,000 people, indirectly provide employment for 26,000, and their annual output collectively is about $16 billion a year. Now, being close to what sounds like a pretty ugly industrial precinct, not necessarily a selling feature, but there is actually a nice green space buffer between the residential areas, the suburbs, and that big industrial precinct, which includes the Spectacles wetlands and the Kwinana golf course. Kwinana Beach isn't too far away as well. So the property market, firstly, vacancies, which were much higher a couple of years ago because there was a bit of a building spurt in that area. It's an area that's got land for new development, and there was very high building of new dwellings 2014, 2016, and eventually that resulted in some oversupply, but steadily over the last 6 to 12 months, the vacancies have come down, so they're now around about 3%. Affordability is a big factor, as I mentioned earlier. There's 5 suburbs that have median prices in the low to mid 200,000s. Not many parts of capital city Australia have housing in the metropolitan area as cheap as that. There's also a couple of other suburbs where Bertram is 350,000 median price and Wellard about 400,000. But overall, certainly very, very achievable for young buyers at those prices. For investors, as well as the cheap buying prices, another very attractive feature is the well above average rental yields. The median yields for most of the suburbs of the Kwinana local government area are above 5%, and there's 3 suburbs on our list here which are above 6%. And that, coupled with the reducing vacancies, suggests that there's pretty good returns to be had for investors who buy at those very affordable prices. There's plenty going on to drive jobs and investment and create employment in this area, including nearby a lithium processing plant, reported to be the largest in the world, which is first stage of which is completed and under production as of this year, and more to come. There's a couple of major council-sponsored precincts that are works in progress. The Challenger precinct, which is a sort of a mixture of a mixed-use residential and other types of facilities, which will include 900 dwellings, and then the education precinct, which is going to have more homes, redevelopment of Aurelia's central shopping precinct, and some schools. So plenty coming up in the near future, which will create economic activity and jobs and improve the amenity of this important part of the Perth market. So one to consider, one that I'll be talking about tomorrow evening when I'm the guest speaker at a major seminar event in Perth, hosted by Niche Living. I'll be talking about this Kwinana precinct because it's a striking example of one of the key features that Perth has to offer right now, which is being the most affordable of the capital cities of Australia. According to at least 2 affordability reports, one of them by ANZ and the other one by Adelaide Bank and the REIA, which I looked at recently. So, just a reminder of some of the other things that are coming up in the next week or so. We'll be publishing a special report next week because it's spring and the markets, particularly in the bigger cities, tend to get a bit excited about that. The so-called spring selling season is starting to heat up, particularly in the two biggest cities. And in recognition of that, we're going to have a special bundle of our top 5 Sydney hotspots report and our top 5 Melbourne hotspots report together in one bundle. Our best picks for the two biggest cities, which currently have seen the bottoming out of their down cycle and a return to growth according to recent figures, and including auction clearance rates and the latest price data. Okay, so that is something to look forward to for next week. But this week, our hotspot of the week is the Kwinana precinct in the southern suburbs of Perth, where I'm going to be heading very early tomorrow morning. That's it for now. Terry Ryder from Hotspotting signing off. Do it again roughly the same time next week. Bye for now.